Okay, then. Let's get to this. Let's try and solve this mystery. We're joined by Kofi Asare. He's Executive Director of Africa Education Watch. Kofi, it's a pleasure to have you. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
So, this is what we know. Out of the 906,000 pupils who enrolled in KG1 all the way back in 2012, only 67%, that's 600,000 of them, will be writing BECE this year. So we're trying to figure out where the remaining 300,000 pupils could possibly be. Kofi, what does your research suggest? What could possibly explain one third of all the kids who have no reason to drop off, due to failure to qualify or any such thing? Why would one third of them disappear from the face of the earth?
Well, once again, good morning to your choice audience. They haven't disappeared from the face of the earth. Perhaps they've disappeared from the government education system. And this is not the first time. Last year we asked similar questions. Last 2 years we did. We've been trying to establish, the survival rates, within our basic education system by trying to use the cohort, the number that enters in your KG1, and then compare it to the number that completes by way of writing BECE for both private and public schools. And it's imagined that a third always, don't write the BECE. So where do they go? One, there are various possibilities, and we indicated in our policy brief that there's a need for further research into the exact whereabouts of all these students. But the options are one. There is a group of there's a group that after KG they will branch into international programs like Cambridge, International Baccalaureate, etc. That's I estimate it to be about 10,000 people per cohort, and so that's just if you like less than 3% or 4% of the number we are looking for. And then there's another group of people, of students who generally may unfortunately die, consistent with our death rate. That's less than 2%. And then also there's the idea that people may travel out of the country. The people are mooting it. I see that idea also to be realistic. If we have high number of the dropout, quote unquote, emerging from urban areas. But if you look at the statistics, if you do a deeper analysis of statistics, you realize that even though 33% are not making it to BECE at the national level, in the 5 northern regions, the percentage is more than 40%, which means that there is a correlation between poverty, and the survival rate. So I don't think that the argument that many have traveled outside the country will hold that much, because this is a case where majority of those who are not surviving are coming from the poverty endemic part of the country, where traveling outside, it's a luxury, or branching into another program, international program, is a luxury. So if you look at it carefully, even before we do further research or traces into the whereabouts, I can confidently say that majority of the students are subject of dropout. According to UNICEF, the cohort survival rate, by primary 6 alone is 18%. The meaning is that by the time these students got to primary 6, 18% had dropped out between primary 1 and primary 6. They entered KG1 in 2012. By the time they got to primary 6, 18% had dropped out. Now, according to the Ministry of Education too, between primary 6 and junior high school 1, that's the primary junior high school transition data, the dropout rate, especially in the deprived regions, is about 20%. And so we are recording double-digit dropouts, at the primary and then between primary 6 and junior high school 1. And I emphasize that between primary 6 and junior high school 1, we have the highest level of dropout in our basic education system. Okay, and the reason is that about 25% of our primary schools do not have junior high schools. About 4,000, about 25%. Apart from that, you come to the realization that in the northern regions alone, in the traditional northern region alone, 60% of primary schools do not have junior high schools. So when they graduate from primary six, many of them graduate back into the community as out of school children because of the long distance, up to 10 kilometers, they have to commute to school daily. So these are issues we've raised, over time, that we must ensure that we achieve parity, between primary school and junior high school, especially in the part of the country where distance to school is a leg matter and it's an issue. But we've not seen any improvement in the statistics, to date. And so I will attribute majority of this dropout of the survival deficits to dropout between primary 6 and junior high school 1.
Now, Kofi, you make a point about these dropouts, and you've talked about some of them not having junior high schools. But there's a country that in the past, for instance, we've identified areas where they do not have senior high schools. We've talked about building day schools. Why haven't we done the same for the junior high schools?
Well, unfortunately, it hasn't appeared to be a priority in government education strategy. The medium-term strategy. And it is an area that is more or less a penumbra because government have been silent on what its strategic, focus is. There was a time the government indicated that they wanted to introduce a new concept where junior high schools are made part of the, second cycle institutions. And then at a point two, government indicated that they were going to build more junior high schools. But the reality is that if you look at the data, the gap between primary and junior high school, I'm talking about the disparity between the number of primary schools and junior high schools, has remained the same since 2016. It is still the fact that about 4,000 primary schools still do not have access to junior high school. So I don't see a strategic push by government towards achieving that parity. And to wait, I don't see anything significant happening there. But there is sufficient literature, especially from international organizations, EduWatch, from UNICEF especially, that suggests that the highest point of dropout in our basic education system is the period between primary 6 and then junior high school 1. Mm. And it is much endemic. It is actually very much profound in the northern regions where up to 60% of primary schools do not have access to junior high schools, and then also distance to school is already an issue because of the sparsely, located nature of some of their communities. I won't rule out other factors that causes school dropout, like poverty. Poverty after the distance to school, poverty is a major determinant of school dropout. So, poverty as a factor in causing basic school dropout, will not be ruled out. But if we really want to have put our finger on this situation, we need to do much more deeper research, into the cohorts, survival, and determine the various, legs of the problem. How many of them might have gone here? How many of them might have gone here? And then determine how many of them remain within the public basic education system, and then also the private basic education system of the state. I'm talking about the BECE system, and still could not progress to BECE and write them. But I will say that out of the 300,000, I can estimate that at least 250,000 of them, did not go anywhere. They dropped out of the education system because that is consistent with the survival data of the Ministry of Education and also of other organizations like UNICEF and African Education Watch.
So, Kofi, if there is such a direct correlation between these dropouts and poverty, that suggests that, FCube, basic education, is really not free, neither is it compulsory or universal. Is this a suggestion of, some insidious failure of the whole basic education agenda?
Well, I think that the whole issue of FQ must be revisited. And we raised this issue 2 years ago when FQ was about 15 years. You see, FQ has become a slogan, and that is why it has to be revisited. Ordinarily, every policy, and FQ is not a policy, it's actually a constitutional provision. Every policy that has the strength of a constitutional backing, must undergo constant review periodically, to ensure that we are achieving the object of FQ. What is FQ? FQ is simply saying that every Ghanaian of school-going age must enroll and complete the full course of basic education. Consistent with FQ, government has an education strategic plan which simply says that between now and 2030, every child who enrolls in kindergarten must complete junior high school training. So if you have a situation where about 33% of those who enroll are not completing junior high school training, then you need to find out what is wrong. Now, the FQ conversation hasn't happened because we haven't made it a priority yet. And let me say this. You see, FQ, the C means compulsory. To date, there's no compulsory. Why is no compulsory? Because we are supposed to mandate local assemblies with the power to enact laws that restrict or compels all parents to enroll their children in school, in breach of which they will pay a fine. Read the Act 560, the Children's Act, and then the education laws. But the reality is that we've not been able to enforce the C aspect of FQ because there is no F. The F is not there. Children are still buying their own bags to school. Just last week, I was engaging a district where a particular school was charging 450 Ghana cedis for junior high school students who are writing the BECE now. And the money was, according to the school, the PTA that decided to pay for 50 cedis each. And the money is meant for extra classes and then other things that FCube should have provided. Okay. But if you look carefully, the same parents are those who came to complain that they can't pay. And so if your child doesn't pay, obviously your child will not participate in the 5 mock examinations that they were planning to undertake. So I don't see FCube happening in the schools because there are many cost barriers, hidden costs that have been met in our basic education system because the state has not been able to fund what was previously funded by parents in 2005, for which reason FCube started. So they have actually crept back into the school environment where parents are paying for, in some schools, they pay to get admission, but it is not documented. In many schools, they pay for their own furniture. They pay for their own exercise books. In the deprived part of this country, we just finished a study in 20 districts. In the deprived part of the country, like Tatale, Sanguli, in Zabzugu, in the Kwantan of the South, students do not have exercise book. It's a luxury. Exercise book is a luxury. All these things should have been supported by FCube, but they are not being supported by FCube. So if the child is in school, the participation is weak because they don't have the basic teaching and learning materials, including exercise books, due to poverty, and then they drop out. But if you look at the secondary education system, we have free exercise books, we have free notebooks, we have free school uniforms, we have free church clothes. So you see, if we were doing something similar to FCube, as is being done to free senior high school, I'm sure that there wouldn't have been the need for many basic schools to smuggle hidden fees and impose them on parents through their PTA. So FCube hasn't come to realization because there's no compulsory. The compulsory aspect has not been enforced, and it's not been enforced because it is not free as it's supposed to be. That is why we need to have a conversation about FCube. Don't forget that in the population census report, according to the government attestation, about 10% of children aged, between 4 and 17 are not in school. And that amounts to about 1.4 million children not being in school. And so FCube really deserves a holistic national conversation to achieve at this point.
So, you talk about how this 300,000 is from one cohort. Undoubtedly, if we were to go through all the 10 cohorts preceding BECE, we are going to find dropouts of different numbers at each stage. And you've alluded to a sort of 1.5 million total number there. Is it too late for these kids? Can anything at all be done to regularize them, bring them into the system?
Well, government has introduced an ID system, and this ID system is supposed to enable policymakers track, people or student survival within the education system. That is one good thing about this ID system. In that case, you'll be able to personalize, this data when you are tracking to find out where exactly they are. So that is one good step that has been taken. But again, I will come back and say that if you give Kofi Asare an ID when he enters kindergarten 1, and about a million or so children in kindergarten 1 and in primary school do not have school furniture, okay, Kofi Asare may likely drop out. And when he drops out, having an ID will be inconsequential, because even if he comes to the school, there's no desk for Kofi Asare. So the ID system is good. It will enable us to track where they are. But beyond knowing where they are, what happens? Because the school environment hasn't been prepared sufficiently to accommodate the child and retain them. Because basic things like this, by 2021, about 2.3 million children in basic schools did not have access to desks per government's own recommended sitting ratio in school. And so if 5,400 schools are still taking place under trees and sheds, and you still can track Kofi Asare by a unique number, if he leaves to farm with the parent because he doesn't want to come and sit on a stone and under a tree, you will track him to the farm, yes. But if you bring him back, he will still go back because the environment in the school is not welcome enough for Kofi to return Kofi Asare. So there are two sides of the story. I believe that what we need to do is that we need to pay more attention to the factors that keep children out of school, and the policymakers are sufficiently aware of this. They are even more aware of this than some of us. We need to pay attention to improving the school, investing in the school environment and improving the school environment, the classrooms, desks, textbooks, exercise books, the things that will let the school environment be encouraging and enjoyable for students must exist. That is, for me, the first thing we need to do. Secondly, we need to strengthen community participation, especially parental participation in education, by ensuring that many of the children who are dropping out, or those who are not enrolling at all, are enrolled. We are aware that there are factors like foster parentage affecting enrollment and dropouts in school, especially in the northern part of Ghana, where once one becomes a child to a foster parent, the likelihood of they being enrolled in school, especially if they are a girl, becomes 19% much lower compared to a boy. There are other issues that make the school environment, not attractive or unsafe, that leads to drop out or low retention. But as I'm saying, policymakers are sufficiently aware of this. What is needed is to invest in the basic school environment and make it more attractive. But there is something good to say about this. We observe that this year, for the first time in recent years, and since my career, we actually are presenting more girls than boys for the BECE. There are about 68 more girls than boys supposed to write the BECE today. Even though in 2012, when they were enrolling at kindergarten 1, there were 6,000 more boys than girls. That is, on one breath, significantly, encouraging, because of the emphasis and the investment that policymakers, the government, civil society organizations, development partners have invested or made in girls' education. But on the other hand, too, it raises the issue of why is it that we have 6,000 more boys in KG1 in 2012, and when they are writing their BECE, you have 68 more girls than boys. These are questions that we need to answer, because holistically, as policymakers, as practitioners, as stakeholders, our duty is to ensure that the school environment is gender-friendly, not just for girls, but for both boys and girls. So we should be recording, equitable numbers when it comes to BECE completion, junior high school completion or BECE candidature for both boys and girls.
Okay, now Kofi, I know that you've been monitoring the BECE. Earlier there were concerns about, funds not being released. We're told that some 10 million has been released, and that's 15% of funds needed. On the whole, what's your assessment of the preparation for this year's BECE?
I think, so far as we are concerned, nothing from the side of WAEC suggests that they are prepared. We listen to their engagement. They are one of our partners. we are aware that WAEC is fully prepared for the BCE. Yes, there were issues of debt, but I keep saying that is not new. There's hardly a year that the government didn't owe WAEC, precedence to WASI or BCE. Our budgeting cycle, always permits that. That is not the ideal situation. One would wish that we would find a way to re-engineer our budgeting cycle and then resolve some of this debt. But we are worried. We are also worried about that, especially when it comes to the issue of invigilators. Because whenever government is owing WAEC, it means that WAEC will owe invigilators who invigilated in last year's BC. And many times we have invigilators being paid, not only invigilators and then markers. Many times it has become a norm that we have them being paid for the previous year's work, weeks or days, sometimes days, to the current year's WASI or BECE. And we believe that when invigilators are treated that way, when markets are treated that way, when external supervisors are treated that way, it doesn't motivate them to be independent enough, or it poses a risk for possible laxity in their independence. And so we want to play this government that we should prioritize the payment of subventions to WAEC, both for BECE and WASI, so that WAEC has the resources it needs to put in place mechanisms that ensure that examination process is fair and is very, 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 very high in security and difficult for anyone to breach the security. All is about resources, and so resources being available at the right time and in the right quantum is critical to ensuring that there is no leakage in questions and that WAEC has the necessary men and women to supervise the BC and the WASI processes.
All right, Kofi, I want to say a big thank you to you for giving us these insights this morning. We appreciate
My pleasure for having me. Okay.
Kofi Asare is Executive Director, Africa Education Watch. And I mean, very significant findings there that more boys than girls, were enrolled in KG for this cohort, but more girls than boys are enrolling for BECE, which means that whatever that factor is that is causing the dropout rate, it's having a heavier effect on boys than girls.
Exactly, Kojo. And, he's raised a lot of reasons that could be the cause of what we're experiencing. But for me, this is the most important thing. In discussions with the government statistician, he makes the point all the time that data is important for national development. You cannot develop without data. And so while we're talking about education, these are things that should not be, it could be, maybe. Let's find out. So what is the reason? Why are people, why do we have about 300,000 people not sitting for the BEC, 300,000 who started school in 2012, whom we are expected to be writing the BEC today? Okay, yes, we can guess, but you ask yourself a very simple question. Part of the reason we brought, school feeding program was to encourage enrollment in our schools. We're supported by the World Bank, by the Dutch government. Today, what's the status of our school feeding program in itself? And for me, this is the challenge. Whenever we start policies or programs aimed at achieving a particular target, we achieve 1, 2, 3, and then we forget. This is what we do most of the time. We're excited with the enrollment figures at the beginning. So you have about 1 million students at KG. Then that's the excitement. We don't come back to find out of the 1 million, how many sit for BEC? Now, it's actually important for us to begin to do the research. How many sit for BEC? How many would sit for WASI? And how many would go to the university? The remainder, what do they do? It's not just saying, okay, this is the end of it. No. What do they do? Does the economy in itself have avenues that these persons, minus the BEC, we're supposed to be a terminal exam at a point. Yeah. It's supposed to be a terminal exam also, and also as a placement exam. So even at a terminal stage, for instance, can we say that these persons, once they leave, find jobs within the Ghanaian economy? Does the Ghanaian economy employ people of this nature? And I'm sure your guess may be as good as mine. Yeah. No. So what becomes of these persons who can no longer go to school?
You see, this is yet another very big indictment of our education system. And for many years, Ghana touted its education system as being one of the best. We kept saying that. You keep hearing it. Oh, as for the education, we're best. But these are the real figures that belie that claim. Look, as recently as 2015, statistics by the Ghana Education Service showed that, as at BECE, 95% of those who complete basic education, so that's BECE, 95% of them can either not read or cannot understand what they read. 95%. This sounds staggering. Okay, but that's GES themselves giving this information in a study that they did alongside the UN. So this is a suggestion that perhaps the entire time spent in basic education is wasted. If first of all 1/3 are going to drop out, and then the 2/3 that are left, 95% of them can either not read or understand what they are reading by the time they write BECE, as recently as 2015. This is problematic. It's problematic, and it indicts our entire education system. It's all well and good making what's it called, high school free, senior high school free. But what is going into it? What is the quality of the product going into it? That you are now spending state resources to give them 3 years of free education. And then how many come out on the other side? What are we feeding into our workforce? We really have to ask some very important questions about our basic education.